Dr. Phil's wife has filed for divorce. It's over. Cheater, Robin has moved out of their home.
Not true. Not true.
Okay, so
For years, Dr. Phil told millions how to fix their relationships. But behind the scenes, his own was quietly falling apart. After years of marriage, Robin McGraw disappeared from the spotlight. And now, Dr. Phil is finally breaking his silence. A leaked video, a missing wedding ring, secret ice raids, and a brand built on healing, now turning toward control. What really happened behind the camera? And why did Robin walk away without saying a word? This isn't just a divorce, it's a reckoning. Let's discover the perfect marriage that wasn't. For years, they seemed untouchable. Dr. Phil and Robin McGraw weren't just a married couple. They were a brand. A polished, smiling, perfectly coordinated unit that spoke with one voice and moved in sync across the television stage. Millions saw them as the real deal. A marriage that survived fame, power, and the relentless pace of daytime television. But what if that image was just that? An image? What if the cracks were always there, hiding behind bright lights and production cuts? And what if Dr. Phil, America's emotional problem solver, was quietly losing the one relationship he was most known for? Dr. Phil McGraw first appeared on Oprah's stage in the late 1990s, offering legal and psychological analysis with his signature no-nonsense attitude. But as his popularity soared and his own show launched in 2002, something else became just as important as his blunt advice: his partnership with Robin. From the very beginning, Robin McGraw was more than a spouse. She was a visible part of his brand. Viewers got used to seeing her in the audience, perched in the front row, smiling, nodding, or reacting to the intense emotional segments playing out on stage. She wasn't just there for support, she was part of the product. As the show grew into a cultural juggernaut, the image of their relationship grew with it. Promotional interviews, magazine spreads, and behind-the-scenes features emphasized their unity. They co-founded Stage 29 Productions together. They co-wrote self-help material. They launched skincare lines, health initiatives, and speaking tours. On paper and on camera, Phil and Robin McGraw represented everything they preached: stability, emotional maturity, mutual respect. Their marriage became part of the show's credibility. If Dr. Phil could fix broken relationships for others, surely his own must be unshakable. This dynamic wasn't accidental. It was a deliberate, strategic part of the Dr. Phil machine. Behind the scenes, Robin wasn't just tagging along. She was deeply involved in the day-to-day of the business. Former production staff say she attended editorial meetings, reviewed footage, and gave feedback on how certain moments would play to the public. She wasn't producing the show alone, but she was certainly shaping it. There was even an unspoken rhythm to their appearances. If Dr. Phil addressed a marital issue on air, Robin would be spotted backstage, visually reinforcing the advice being given. Together, they turned emotional credibility into commercial power. The McGraw name became synonymous with daytime authority. Between the show, their publishing empire, branded wellness products, and media deals, they built a multi-million-dollar portfolio anchored in their dynamic as a couple. Fans followed not just the advice, but the marriage. To many, Robin and Phil weren't just TV personalities. They were proof that love, loyalty, and success could coexist in the spotlight. And that's what made the first subtle shifts so unsettling. Some fans began noticing Robin's absence from major tapings in the final seasons. Unlike earlier years, she was no longer seen in every episode. Instagram posts started showing only Robin's solo appearances at book launches, charity events, and motivational conferences, without even a passing mention of Dr. Phil. At first, people assumed it was scheduling, or perhaps Robin was taking a step back from the limelight. But then came the changes behind the camera. By late 2023, Robin had stopped attending production meetings at Merritt Street Media, the McGraw's rebranded media company. One of the most shared quotes from Robin's 2024 book reads, "You can't heal the world if you're exhausted yourself." She never names Phil, but she doesn't have to. And then, of course, there's the video. In 2019, during a taping in Texas, a behind-the-scenes video captured Dr. Phil arguing with a director. Robin calmly offered a suggestion, but he cut her off mid-sentence. No yelling, no insult, but the air turned cold. The crew went silent. That clip was never meant to be seen, but when it resurfaced years later, it raised eyebrows. On their own, these moments seemed small, but together they formed a pattern. Growing silence, missed meetings, fewer public appearances. The marriage built on emotional transparency had become carefully guarded. So the real question is, how long were they pretending nothing was wrong? The divorce heard around the internet. On July 14, 2022, something happened that no one saw coming. Dr. Phil, yes, that Dr. Phil, the man whose name is practically welded to the idea of marriage advice, was caught on video leaving a divorce attorney's office in Pasadena, California. He walked out, head down, lips pressed shut, and slid into the back seat of a black SUV. It hit the internet like a bomb. Dr. Phil, the self-proclaimed expert on fixing broken homes, was in the middle of quietly dismantling his own. The footage first appeared on a small social media account known for tracking celebrity legal movements. The caption was just 5 words: "Something big happened today." No name, but it didn't take long for people to recognize the unmistakable profile of one of America's most recognizable TV personalities. The silence that followed made everything worse. For over 3 months, Dr. Phil's team said absolutely nothing. Every day without a comment only fueled more speculation. Did they split? Was it amicable? Was something darker going on? And if this man, who built a career on confronting family problems head-on, couldn't be honest about his own, what did that say about everything else? And then people started noticing something strange. Robin McGraw had vanished. Not from the public entirely, but from his world. She was absent from multiple specials celebrating the final season of Dr. Phil. She skipped media interviews, avoided red carpets, and made no public appearances alongside her husband. And on her Instagram, no anniversary messages, no couples photos, only carefully curated content. Quotes from her self-help books, promotional shots from speaking engagements, and brief videos of her giving motivational talks. Always alone, never mentioning Phil by name. Then came the quotes. At a private seminar in Dallas, Robin addressed a crowd of women and said, "Never let anyone define you as someone else's wife." It was a broad statement, until you remembered who was saying it. The clip was posted briefly online before being taken down within hours, but not before people took screenshots, pulled the audio, and began sharing it widely. Taken in isolation, it could have passed for generic advice. But taken in the context of everything else, it was clearly a quiet signal that something had changed behind the scenes. Then, the insiders started talking. Former employees of Stage 29 Productions, Dr. Phil and Robin's joint production company, began leaking details. One staffer, who had been with the company for over a decade, told a media outlet that Robin hadn't been to a major production meeting since early 2022. Another reported that she no longer had final say over certain segments, even though she had once played a hands-on role in shaping the content and tone of the show. And then came the bombshell. Robin's name had been quietly removed from the Stage 29 and Merit Street Media executive directories. This wasn't just a personal separation. This was a professional unraveling. How does a woman go from being the face of a media empire to being quietly erased from its masthead? Robin had once been essential to the operation. According to multiple former staff, she not only influenced content but often mediated behind-the-scenes tensions and ensured the show retained a sense of balance. She was the emotional glue, one staff member said. But sometime in mid-2022, all of that changed. Emails stopped coming from her account. Executive decisions went through new channels. When Merit Street's website was redesigned in late 2023, Robin's name was gone from the leadership section entirely. There was no announcement, no press release, just absence. And viewers were paying attention. Fans who had followed the couple for decades started putting the pieces together. They revisited old episodes, noticed subtle shifts in body language, tone, even wardrobe. Some noted that Dr. Phil had stopped wearing his wedding ring on air. Others caught that certain episodes, especially in the last 2 seasons, carried a colder, more distanced vibe, particularly when discussing family or romantic issues. He rarely referred to Robin. She never appeared on set. The warmth that once characterized their joint brand had cooled, replaced by a more clinical, matter-of-fact approach to emotional storytelling. In professional terms, what happened was a quiet restructuring. But emotionally, it was an implosion, just done silently in slow motion and behind closed doors. This is where things get especially intriguing. According to 2 independent media analysts who reviewed publicly available corporate filings, Robin's legal association with Merit Street Media wasn't formally dissolved, but all voting rights and decision-making authority were reassigned in early 2024. This means Robin may still technically hold shares or retain legacy titles, but she has no practical power in the company. And that, in media language, is the difference between a partner and a placeholder. Meanwhile, Robin's personal brand began to evolve. Her 2024 book didn't address the divorce directly, but the tone was unmistakably different. Entire sections were devoted to boundary setting, emotional exhaustion, and reclaiming personal identity. Chapter 3, in particular, became a favorite among readers. Titled "Worthy on My Own," it includes the now widely quoted line, "You can be loved and still feel invisible. You can be praised and still feel voiceless." Many took it as a subtle reference to her marriage, and once that interpretation caught on, the quote took on a life of its own. It was turned into graphics, reposted on Instagram, and even used in TikTok soundbites. Back at Dr. Phil's camp, things remained tightly sealed. No interviews, no updates, just business as usual, at least on the surface. But behind the scenes, things were shifting fast. A leaked internal memo from a distributor revealed that Dr. Phil had requested new messaging guidelines for staff when asked about Robin's involvement. They were to say, "Robin is currently focused on her personal projects," and offer no further detail. Another source reported that the green room at the studio had been redesigned. Robin's dedicated space was removed. Why go through all the trouble to hide something that was already obvious? The answer seems simple: control. Dr. Phil built his empire on emotional control, his ability to diagnose, dissect, and direct feelings. But in the case of his own life, he couldn't afford to let emotion take center stage. At least not yet. Not until he was ready to tell the story on his terms, on his stage, with his own camera angles. But the damage was already done. By the time his team crafted a response, the narrative had taken on a life of its own. Every photo without Robin, every vague quote, every corporate update was seen through the lens of a man losing control, not just of his brand, but of his identity. From therapist to enforcer, the ICE raids and the new Dr. Phil. Dr. Phil, the man who once built his brand on emotional healing, had now positioned himself quite literally on the front lines of American law enforcement. And he brought the cameras with him. What drives a former psychologist turned media figure to embed himself in ICE raids? To understand the shift, you have to look at more than just headlines. Since the official end of his daytime show in 2023, Dr. Phil has not slowed down. In fact, he's rebranded drastically. Merit Street Media, the network he now controls, has leaned heavily into content that blends traditional values with high-drama storytelling. But while his earlier years were focused on addiction, family therapy, and conflict resolution, his current programming deals with immigration, crime, and political ideology. The new flagship show, Dr. Phil Primetime, no longer features walk-on guests with fractured marriages. Instead, it spotlights national debates. Segments focus on border control, education policy, policing, and parental rights. His language has become more aggressive, more confrontational. He no longer asks guests how they feel. He tells them what's wrong with the world and what needs to be done to fix it. And often the solution involves stronger authority, tighter rules, and less patience for what he calls excuses wrapped in feelings. In a 2025 interview during CPAC, the Conservative Political Action Conference, Dr. Phil said, "If I used television to help families heal before, I now use it to defend them." He was speaking in the context of what he described as a breakdown in traditional family structure. But the message was broader. His entire platform had shifted from inner healing to outer defense. And this transformation wasn't just ideological, it was aesthetic. Gone were the buttoned-up dress shirts and soft blue lighting. Now he appeared under harsh white lights in tactical gear, with cold industrial backdrops. Robin, of course, was nowhere in sight. That contrast is impossible to ignore. Her brand had always been rooted in empathy, femininity, and emotional resilience. She spoke to women about self-worth, about being heard, about finding space in a world that often diminishes female voices. She wrote about grace. He now talks about grit. Their personal split, it seems, mirrored a deeper philosophical one. While Robin withdrew into privacy and personal empowerment, Dr. Phil marched into public arenas that centered on confrontation. He didn't just change his content, he changed his audience. His original viewer base, which once skewed female and middle-aged, has gradually given way to an older, more politically conservative demographic. His endorsements, once limited to wellness brands and book tours, now include appearances with Republican governors, law enforcement officials, and political candidates. What happens when a man who once counseled conflict becomes an agent of it? The answer might lie in the footage itself. In the Los Angeles raid, aired in June, Dr. Phil stands beside agents as they approach a residence. He doesn't participate in the arrests, but he interviews officers before and after the operation. He asks about deterrence, about crime patterns, about public safety. At one point he says, "We are not dealing with immigration. We are dealing with criminal exploitation of our system." That sentence, deliberate, measured, and camera-ready, was clipped, subtitled, and broadcast across conservative news channels within hours. What's striking is not just what Dr. Phil says, but how he says it. This is a man trained in psychology, a man who once helped guests navigate childhood trauma and complex grief. And whether intentional or not, the shift sends a clear message. Dr. Phil no longer sees himself as a healer. He sees himself as a defender of families, of order, of a worldview he believes is under threat. Cracks in the brand. The long decline of Dr. Phil's reputation. Before the divorce ever made headlines, before Robin's absence became impossible to ignore, cracks were already forming in Dr. Phil's public image. They weren't sudden or dramatic. They were quiet, cumulative, small moments that, over time, reshaped how people saw the man who once seemed like a steady, grounded voice in chaotic households across America. By the time his marriage publicly fell apart, many viewers had already begun to ask a much larger question. Was Dr. Phil ever really who we thought he was? The first major blow came in early 2008. Britney Spears was in the middle of a highly publicized mental health crisis. Paparazzi were surrounding her hospital, tabloids were spiraling into overdrive, and fans were genuinely concerned for her safety. In the middle of all that, Dr. Phil appeared at the hospital, claiming to be there as a family friend. But just days later, he appeared on television, discussing Britney's condition, her mental state, and what he believed needed to happen next. He didn't have her permission. He didn't have her family's consent to speak. And in doing so, he crossed a line that mental health professionals, fans, and even his own supporters couldn't ignore. The backlash was swift. Critics accused him of using her situation for ratings. Mental health advocates said he violated core ethical principles: confidentiality, consent, and non-exploitation. Britney's family publicly condemned the move, calling it opportunistic and harmful. It wasn't just a misstep, it was a moment that opened the door to a much deeper critique. That Dr. Phil, despite his television credentials, had drifted far from the responsibilities of real psychological care. That critique deepened in 2016 during one of the most controversial interviews of his career. Shelley Duvall, the actress best known for her role in The Shining, appeared on Dr. Phil in a visibly distressed state. The segment framed her as someone in urgent need of help, but the tone, the presentation, and the editing left many viewers deeply uncomfortable. Shelley spoke about delusions, paranoia, and her belief that people were trying to harm her. Rather than handle the conversation with compassion or clinical structure, the episode framed her mental illness as entertainment. Critics didn't hold back. The Guardian published a piece calling the interview an exploitation of someone visibly suffering. A Stanford University report later cited the episode in a broader study on how television distorts mental health narratives. Mental health professionals, including the National Alliance on Mental Illness, condemned the show for using Shelley's situation as a spectacle rather than offering meaningful care or protection. Why does a man trained in psychology allow suffering to be packaged for ratings? The answer, many have argued, lies in the way the Dr. Phil show evolved over the years. When it premiered in 2002, it was marketed as a tough love, no-nonsense alternative to traditional therapy. Dr. Phil's approach was direct, often confrontational, but grounded in his clinical background. He had a way of cutting through the noise and naming emotional patterns in real time. It was intense, but for many viewers, it worked. But by the early 2010s, something had shifted. The show became louder, more sensational, more emotionally chaotic. Instead of long-form conversations about healing, episodes began to feature viral headlines, shocking accusations, and outbursts caught on camera. The pacing changed. The production style changed. Guests were no longer just families in crisis. They were characters in a drama that played out week after week. Viewers weren't just tuning in to learn. They were tuning in to watch people break down. That shift came with consequences. More and more critics began calling the show toxic, exploitative, and outdated. The show's brand of advice, often simplified, formulaic, and tailored for television, began to feel disconnected from the complexities of modern mental health discourse. While psychology had moved toward trauma-informed care, consent-based intervention, and long-term support, Dr. Phil remained rooted in quick fixes, public accountability, and performative healing, and the audience noticed. Younger viewers, particularly millennials and Gen Z, began abandoning the show altogether. On social media platforms like TikTok, entire communities emerged that picked apart old Dr. Phil clips, highlighting what they saw as manipulative editing, coerced confessions, and emotional pressure tactics. Former guests even came forward, revealing that producers pushed them to exaggerate their stories, manipulated what they said during interviews, or surprised them with information on air that they had not consented to discuss. One former guest, who appeared in 2018, said in an anonymous interview that she was told her segment would be about teenage anxiety. When she arrived on set, producers had already lined up surprise guests from her past and shifted the episode to focus on manipulative teen behavior. She said she felt blindsided, embarrassed, and worse off than before she came. It was like walking into therapy and finding out it's a courtroom instead, she said. Even Dr. Phil's own credentials became part of the conversation. While he holds a doctorate in clinical psychology, he has not been a licensed psychologist since the early 2010s. In many states, that distinction wouldn't matter for television, but in the eyes of critics, it symbolized a deeper problem. Dr. Phil had stopped being a therapist long ago. He was now something else entirely, a performer. By the time the divorce went public, this disillusionment had been building for years. And for those who had been following closely, the end of his marriage didn't come as a shock. It came as a reflection. The emotional distance he seemed to show on television, his cold demeanor, his rigid advice, his refusal to soften, was now being mirrored in his personal life. Viewers had once trusted him to understand relationships on a human level. But as more episodes leaned into dramatics rather than empathy, that trust began to erode. Why do we turn to people who can't model the very advice they give? That question became unavoidable, especially when even longtime fans started to question not just the advice, but the man giving it. Social media posts from former viewers described a growing sense of unease. "I used to watch Dr. Phil with my mom every day. Now it just feels mean." Others said they felt the show had lost its moral center. And in that environment, when the divorce news broke, it didn't feel like a rupture. It felt like confirmation. By 2024, the audience for Dr. Phil Primetime had narrowed. Viewership skewed older and more conservative. The tone of the show had changed dramatically, now focusing on hot-button issues like gender identity, immigration, and school discipline. Guests were often political activists, law enforcement officials, or commentators known for their controversial takes. Dr. Phil wasn't just offering relationship advice, he was issuing warnings about the direction of American society. His couch had turned into a pulpit, Robin's quiet exit, and her side of the story. While Dr. Phil was stepping into the spotlight of political media, Robin McGraw was quietly stepping away from everything they had built together. There was no press conference, no scandal, no dramatic farewell. She didn't write a memoir or appear on talk shows. Instead, she slipped out of view, and that silence said more than any headline could. Over time, her absence became impossible to ignore. The woman who had once been on every red carpet, every promo shoot, every season premiere of Dr. Phil had stopped showing up altogether. By early 2024, industry insiders confirmed what fans had already begun to suspect. Robin McGraw had fully withdrawn from public-facing roles at Merit Street Media. When Merit Street Media updated its website in March of 2025, Robin's biography and executive profile were gone. Her name, once listed alongside Dr. Phil's as co-founder and strategic partner, had been scrubbed from the leadership section entirely. No announcement accompanied the change. No article acknowledged it. But it was clear to anyone who'd followed the McGraw brand. Robin wasn't just stepping back. She was being erased from the infrastructure of a company she had helped build. Why did she leave so quietly? Her 2024 book, Restoring Grace, wasn't framed as a response to the divorce. But in hindsight, the emotional undercurrent is unmistakable. Throughout the book, Robin speaks of exhaustion, emotional identity, and the slow erosion of self in long-term partnerships. One line in particular became widely quoted across social media. "You can't heal the world if you're exhausted yourself." A message from someone who had given too much for too long and finally chose herself instead. Chapter 3 of the book, titled Worthy on My Own Terms, delves into the idea of emotional dilution. What happens when your identity becomes so intertwined with another person's that you forget where they end and you begin? Robin writes, "Sometimes the cost of harmony is invisibility, and sometimes silence is not weakness, it's preservation." Again, no names, no direct accusations, but the implications were powerful. And for many long-time viewers of Dr. Phil, it confirmed what they had begun to suspect. Robin hadn't just left the marriage. She had slowly extracted herself from a system where her voice had been minimized. This isn't to say that Robin was passive. In fact, internal documents from Merit Street Media show that she had once been highly active in shaping the company's direction. Sources familiar with the company's structure confirmed that Robin had previously held veto power over certain types of content. She was also reportedly the one who proposed expanding into true crime and social justice content in 2023, hoping to steer the network into more substantive programming. But after a major strategy meeting in September of that year, one she did not attend, her involvement appeared to taper off rapidly. By January of 2024, all voting rights tied to her executive position had been transferred to other senior staff. Legally, she may still hold shares, but functionally, she no longer has a seat at the table. This process wasn't announced publicly because it didn't need to be. Corporate law allows for silent restructurings, particularly in privately held media firms like Merit Street, where ownership is tightly controlled. But make no mistake, this was not a mutual leadership transition. It was a quiet exit. And the public noticed. The absence of a messy split or a loud dispute didn't dampen public interest. If anything, it heightened it. Robin's silence felt loaded, intentional, calculated. dignified. In a media environment where ex-wives are often expected to tell all, Robin chose not to. There was no Vanity Fair interview, no sit-down with Oprah, no Instagram video with sad piano music. Her decision to remain quiet became its own form of autonomy. She let Dr. Phil tell his version of the story on his platform, in his format, but she didn't participate in the narrative. She left the frame, and in doing so, she controlled her part of the story without uttering a word. Is it possible that her silence speaks louder than his speech? For some fans, Robin's withdrawal was seen as graceful. For others, it was read as strategic. But either way, her exit created a sharp contrast with Dr. Phil's new image. While he stood on stage at political events denouncing emotional overreach and calling for stronger family enforcement, Robin was quietly encouraging women to learn the difference between loyalty and self-neglect. The tone couldn't be more different. His message is control, hers is release. This divergence in public messaging reflects a deeper emotional and philosophical split. Dr. Phil, in recent interviews, has leaned into themes of national identity, civic duty, and the need for discipline in American households. Robin, through her writing and the few interviews she's given, has leaned into personal restoration, boundaries, and inner balance. While he speaks about defending the family, she speaks about leaving the version of yourself that only lived for it. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.